We're going to continue, but not exactly where we left off. What I mean by that is actually I have the desire to retrace our steps a little bit and cover some points that we missed on the first two verses, and then we'll go on to verse 3 of chapter 1 of Tehillim of Psalms, okay? It's a couple of things we missed, and I was actually thinking, is there any biblical basis for retracing steps? Is this a good thing or a bad thing, what I'm doing? Well, obviously, logically, if I miss something in Torah, I should certainly go back, right? But nevertheless, I started thinking about it, about the idea of retracing or reversing, turning around. And of course, the first thing that comes to mind is Lot's wife. And she turned around, and that wasn't so great. That ended with her downfall. So is that a kind of a sign, or how should I say, not really a sign, but an example of retracing that is not good? So I thought, well, is this then maybe not a good idea? Maybe I should just go forward. Then I thought to myself of the story of Jacob. In regards to Jacob, in the beginning of Parashas Vayetze, it says that when Jacob left home and he headed towards Haran, it said, oh, wait, I realized that I passed a spot where my forefathers prayed I should go back. And in going back, miraculously, his path is miraculously, it kind of skips. He very, very quickly, miraculously quickly returns to this spot, Beis Kel, where his forefathers prayed. So I thought to myself, clearly we see a distinction here. When it comes to something negative, a transgression, the wife of Lot was turning towards Sodom. She was turning towards Sodom and Gomorrah, correct? That was she was facing an evil, a wicked city. So you can look at that literally, because we know to look in the face of the wicked is actually a bad thing to do. There are verses that talk about that as being, sinful. And it's actually, I believe, even brought in actually in the Jewish code of law not to look in the face of the wicked. And by the way, when I say look, it's referring to a stare. It's not referring to looking, seeing someone and looking away, but staring at someone deeply, taking them in. So Lot's wife was doing something wrong in that way. And if you think of it in a more broader sense, she was looking at this wicked city, turning around and gazing at it. And that was clearly a sinful thing. On the other hand, the idea of turning back to the good, turning towards Torah and towards, so to speak, a place where Jacob's forefathers tread before is a good thing. So we're going to go back and discuss some points that we missed, okay? I'm also going to really try to bring out the inferences in the words more this time than I did last time. So let's go back all the way to the beginning. And actually, not only are we going back to the beginning because I missed some very beautiful and precious insights, but I came to my mind that these insights, at least some of them, particularly are directed towards the B'nai Noach community, that they're directed towards the nations. And I'll explain why that is. So let's go back to the first word. Yes, we will finish this chapter eventually, but right now we're going back to the first word. Ashrei. That is a prefatory word. It's an introductory word to a chapter of Psalms. Now, it means, as we said last time, fortunate. It's also translated as happy or fulfilled. Now, we didn't examine the first Rashi in Tehillim, which discusses this word. Rashi says that there are 10 different introductory words that are used in Tehillim in the entire book. There's 10. and they parallel 10 different people who authored different chapters in Tehillim. Okay? Now, the 10 different words are as follows. Nitzuach, Nigun, Mizmor, Shir, Hallel, Tfilah, Bracha, Hoda'ah, Ashrei, and Hallelujah. 10 different words. Rashi says these 10 different words of introduction parallel the 10 different people who authored the book of Tehillim. The first one is Adam. Second is Malki Tzedek. Malki Tzedek was the king that's mentioned in the story of Abraham after he vanquished the four kingdoms, the four kings. Malki Tzedek brought out bread and wine and blessed Abraham, and Abraham gave him a tenth. Rashi there says that Malki Tzedek was Shem, that he was the son of Noah, actually. He must have been a very elderly fellow at this point, even then. So those are the first two. We're going evidently in chronological order here in Rashi. So Adam, Malki Tzedek, Avraham, Moshe, David, Shlomo, Asaph, and the three sons of Korach. So, Abraham was the first Jew, but he also technically was a Ben Noach. Halachically, he didn't have to keep the 613 commandments. He kept the Torah in an obligatory fashion as a Ben Noach, correct? Now, Adam and Malki Tzedek, clearly they were not Jews, correct? They weren't Israelites at all. Adam being Adam Arishon, the first man, and Malki Tzedek being Noah's son. So what does this tell us? That Psalms is being authored actually by some people who aren't Jewish. Some of them great men who were either a son of Noah or Adam himself. So not only that, evidently, the entire book, because if you look at Rashi's phraseology, he's saying that these 10 different words of introduction that are used throughout Tehillim are because there are 10 authors. So in a certain way, it's almost like Rashi's saying that this is a combined effort of the 10. The 10 are constantly being represented throughout the book. So that seems to imply that they have an authorship in a certain extent to the whole thing. That's my suggestion. That last part is not what Rashi says. That's my inference from an indication just that it appears to me from what Rashi is telling us. But in any event, at the very least, we see that there were Bnei Noach, and even before that, Adam was an author of the book of Psalms, the book of Tehillim. Okay? So that's what I wanted to add in regards to the first word. Let's go on to the second word. The second word is ha'ish, the man. So I discussed with you last time that the word ish means someone of significant stature. And if you look through the Bible, through the Chumash, you're going to find that the word ish is always in reference of someone of stature. Now, at first I thought to myself, a person of stature, yeah, of course. The word ish is used in reference to Noach. Noach ish tzaddik. Noach was a righteous man. So the word ish is used in reference to Noach. Whereas another place we find the word ish is used, it's used in reference to Moses. In fact, Rashi specifically points this out in last week's parsha. Well, now it's 2 weeks ago. In Parshas Yisro, Rashi discusses in the verse early on, it states there that the man embraced the other. So the question is, who is the man who embraced who? So Rashi says, in other words, and the verse uses the language ish. Ish, tzre'eu, that the one man embraced his fellow. So Rashi asked the question, this is actually a quote from the sages, who embraced who? Was it Moses embraced Jethro or Jethro embraced Moses? Which way was it? So Rashi says, well, the word ish is used in reference to Moses and refers therefore to Moses. This is found in Bamidbar. Rashi references a verse in chapter 12 of the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar. It's a very famous verse. It's the third verse there. It says, Va'ish Moshe anav ma'od, mikol ha'adam asher al pnei ha'adama. It says, and the man Moses was very humble from any man on the face of the earth. So the way that the verse expresses the man Moses, it says ha'ish, ha'ish, which is the exact word that it says here in Tehillim, ha'ish, with the preface hey, which is represents it. It's in English it's the. It's in English you'd say the man. Without the hey, it's just man. Okay, the man is talking about a specific man. So that exact language is used in Numbers to refer to Moshe Rabbeinu, to refer to Moses. Ha'ish Moshe anav me'od mikol adam. That the man Moses was more humble than any man on the face of the earth. And our sages say that the word ish, therefore, in Jethro also refers to Moses. Okay, so that means that we see here when we're going to apply this. Okay, so that means when this chapter is referring to an ish, it's talking to a person of stature like Moses. Wow, we're talking about a big person. This isn't. We're not talking small potatoes here. So that was my first thought in regards to the word. However, we have a biblical problem with this. Anybody know why? Well, we also find the word ish used in regards to Esav. Okay? Because it says in Parshas Toldos, it says that Esav was ish tzayid ish sadeh. That Esav was a man of the hunt, and a man of the field, or the fields. So here we see the exact same word, although it's without the prefix hey, but we see the word ish talking about Esav. And we know also that ish sayid is a negative reference, right? I mean, in other words, we're following the understanding of our sages, and that sayid means that he was a deceiver. Right? At least it alludes to that, right? And a person of the fields, that he was a hunter, he was a man of the outside. So at first glance, it appears that the word ish refers to a very, very righteous person, really a godly person, because Moses is referred to ish elikim. He's referred to the godly man. I think he's maybe the only person referred to in that at the end of the Torah and Deuteronomy. But unfortunately, we can't really define the word ish that way. We have to face facts that the word ish is also used in a negative sense. So what do we see? We see that the word ish means someone of stature, someone of skill, someone of importance. Right? Because when we say that Esau is an ish sayid, he's a man of a hunt, we don't mean that he's just mediocre. We mean he's really good at doing what he does. He's tops. So it's a man. So it's a human being of skill, a human being of stature, of importance. So could be negative or positive. Obviously, in the sense of Tehillim, we're using it in the sense of Moses in a positive sense. It could be, again, I like to suggest that the prefix, hey, we find that specifically by Moses. You do not find that in terms of Esav, but I'll be honest, I haven't searched the entire Tanakh to tell you that never do we find the word ha'ish used by a wicked person. So I'm not going to guarantee that. What we do know is it's talking about a person of stature. And here Tehillim is talking in a positive sense. I want to add one more point in regard to the word ha'ish, and its biblical references, which is quite profound. And that is that the word Aish not only means someone of great spiritual stature, or generally of great stature, it could also mean a latent ability or potential for great stature. Anybody know how I know this? Well, you can't speak to me, but you can let me know later, or you can raise your hands if this is something that's familiar to you. In the story of when Moses strikes and slays the Egyptian, it says that Vayifen kol vacho vayar ki ein ish. He looked this way and that, and he saw there was no man. So obviously the question arises, which Rashi implies, and that is, what do you mean he looked each way and he saw there was no man? Again, a man means ish, a person of stature. Well, maybe he saw somebody who was an onlooker. I mean, why does it say he saw no man? It should just say, Vayar ki ein ro'eh, and he saw that there was no one looking. What do you mean he saw there was no man? Rashi comments and brings the Midrash, that the Midrash says that he looked with divine foresight, with the divine spirit, and he saw there was no converts that would come from this Egyptian. So in other words, the Egyptian wasn't an ish himself. He saw ein ish. He looked this way and that, and he saw there was no man in the future. He saw in the future there was no man. So that shows you that our sages understood the word ish means potential, in the future. You can be an ish because later on someone will come out from you that will be an ish. It's clearly in our sages' teachings, and the Rashi brings us. And you want to ask a question, or are you just telling me that you, Adam, that you thought you want to ask a question?
Please, yes.
Okay.
In that case, does it say Ha'ish or Ish concerning the man that Moshe was able to foresee? Was it?
Let me double check, but I believe it says just Ish. Let me see. Says ki ein ish without the hey, without the prefix hey. So again, for those of you who are not familiar with Hebrew out there, when I say referring to the hey, in the English that would be translated as the word the. So again, so far from just our very, not very in-depth study, the word the man, we found that in reference to Moses, but the word man we found in reference to both men or people of stature, whether for good or for bad, or for ill. And finally, as I said, the word ish can also mean someone who has the potential for great good. Okay, so now we got through the first two words pretty in depth. Now let's move on to some other issues in the verse. And again, this really got me to thinking about other biblical allusions, some other words here we're going to move on to. And there will also their relation to the 7 Noahide laws, believe it or not. Yeah, I figure out ways to bring that in somehow. Let's take a look. So, we notice the commentaries discuss this, and the Malbim defines for us the distinction between the words Rishayim, wicked, and Chataim, sinners, and Leitzim, and scoffers. I mean, they're clearly different, but what's the significance of the difference? So I was meditating on this, and it came to me that once again, Rashi helps us out here in Genesis. Not literally in Genesis, but in Parshas Lech Lecha. The words Rishayim and Chataim, wicked and sinners, is found in Parshat Lech Lecha. Do you know where? It's found in regards to the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. It refers to them as wicked and sinners. There it's discussing Lot's decision to move his abode and dwell in Sodom. And clearly the scripture is trying to critique his actions And immediately following this decision tells us that this city is not a good place to be living. This is not a moral environment. And it's a place of Rishayim Mechatayim Lashem Ma'od, that they are wicked and sin to God very much. Let's take a look there. So this is Genesis chapter 13, verse 14. V'anshei Sodom ra'im v'chatayim Lashem Ma'od. In the Art Scroll Chumash, the Art Scroll 5 books, it states, "Now the people of Sodom are wicked and sinful toward Hashem exceedingly." So if you look at Rashi there, Adlak, he says, Ra'im, wicked, begufam, with their bodies. Chatayim, sinning, b'mamonam, with their money or with their property. Interesting. So there's a distinction in sins between with their body and with their property. And wicked and sinners is a reference to the people of Sodom. Now, the people of Sodom, were they Jews? They were not. So we see right away in Genesis a reference to human beings, their wickedness and sinning, not in reference to the 613 commandments, but an early reference to the transgression of the 7 Noahide laws. And clearly, if God punished Sodom, it wasn't because it was because they violated their own personal moral code. It was because it was based on the 7 Noahide laws, that they had transgressed those 7. The verse goes on to say, not only did they transgress it, but Rashi says that the verse says to God. This means they knew God and they purposely rebelled. Rashi continues on there. He says that. He says, Lashem Ma'od, to God exceedingly, Yodim Ribonam Umiskabnim Lemrodo. So they knew their master and they intended to rebel against him. In any event, we see that the words Rashayim and Chataim allude to sins against the 7 Noahide laws. Am I correct? Right? So therefore, immediately in Tehillim, we are referencing basic laws of the 7 Noahide laws, certainly, and reference to, I'm not saying it's not referencing to the 613 for the Jewish people, but it's a general reference of 2 types of sins. Begufam, Rashayim means wicked, means with their bodies. They sin with their bodies. And Chataim, Rashi tells us, with their property. So let's think about the 7 Noahide laws for a moment. Which ones fall into the categories of sins with the body, and which fall into the category of sins with property? So, the first one is idolatry. Interestingly enough, this one falls into both categories. It's the sin a person can do with their body, prostrating themselves, performing various forms of service to an idolatry or pagan god. It also can refer to property, because a person donates their property or builds an altar. Those are transgressions of the first of the 7 against idolatry. That's all forbidden. Someone would set aside their property for idolatry. They are transgressing the first of the 7 Noahide laws. And if anybody was paying attention to Adam Cobb's lectures, classes on idolatry, they would know this. Correct? In any event. So that's the first one. Let's think about, there's many different orders, but let's just take for the second one murder. Murder is something generally a person does with their body. Correct? Of course, we could extrapolate a little bit, also based on the sages, and that is that a person who is impoverished is deemed to be like they're dead. So impoverishing another human being is a form of killing them. How do I know this? Once again, we turn to our great teacher, Rashi. Rashi brings from the sages that when Jacob fled from his brother Esav, Esav's son Eliphaz followed, and he caught up with him. And what occurred? So Yaakov was quite a yeshiva boy. He told him a lumdish vart. That means he taught him, a Talmudic pilpul, a Talmudic way of understanding things. He said, listen, you're supposed to kill me? Because he sensed that Eliphaz didn't want to do this. Rashi says Eliphaz grew up on Isaac's knee and was taught Torah. He really felt guilty. But he didn't want to violate and go against his father. So Jacob said, you know what, I'll tell you what you do. We'll do this what's called lumdish, with a Talmudic thumb. You're not going to really kill me. You'll take my property, and I'll be deemed as dead Talmudically, and that's going to be it. But in any event, so what we see here is that impoverishment is a form of death. So you could say in that way, if that someone, God forbid, were to take the property of another improperly and leave them destitute, that they've killed that other person. And so in that way, it falls under an offshoot, a Talmudic offshoot of the sin of murder is to take a person's property. So therefore, once again, we find that both begufam and mamonam come under one of the 7 laws. Both transgressing with the body and property is done when somebody murders someone, either physically or by taking away their property and leaving them impoverished. So the distinction, though, would be that if someone steals from another or cheats them but doesn't leave them impoverished, they haven't committed any type of comparison or shade or, some form of murder-like act. It's only when you leave a person impoverished where they don't have food to eat, they can't sustain themselves. That's a form of similar to murder. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Now, blasphemy is a little easier. Someone, God forbid, as in Hebrew they say that blesses the name, because we don't want to say it in the more accurate or direct term. But if somebody blasphemes, that's clearly with their body. That's with their mouth. They're saying something. And in Judaism, saying something has force. And despite that you didn't hurt anyone or push anything or move anything in the physical universe, that's a very serious transgression. It's done with the person's body. Obviously, theft, clearly that is a prohibition directly relating to chatayim, to transgressing with your property, stealing from another person, taking their property, or using your business. God forbid a person uses their business to cheat or some way they're using their property to harm another. There's another offshoot of that would relate to property, and that is if basically what's called in English torts, if somebody's property harms another. So if somebody leaves an open pit, or more directly if a person's, it's not so common today, but if someone's cattle harms another person or harms their property, that's a sin done with property. So what do we have left? What haven't I gone through? Let's see, idolatry, murder, theft, blasphemy. Let's see, murder, theft, blasphemy. It's not coming to me right now. We also obviously have the limb, harm to animals. That falls in greatly to the property category because you're dealing with the effects on another body that exists in the universe besides oneself. On the other hand, the physical body is involved. I mean, literally, if a person were to chop off a limb of a living animal, that's something done with the human body. Adultery is the other one. That clearly is sin with the body. It has a very harmful spiritual effect on the body, and it is the most, you could say it's an intense bodily experience. Clearly, the sin is with the body. However, if somebody would to engage in a prostitution business, that may be some type of an offshoot of property, through property, soliciting people to sin in the sin of adultery. If it was actually through an adulterous situation where, for example, a person would, God forbid, prostitute one's wife, or a situation, such a situation. So I think that covers 6. The last one, I was thinking, I'd like to suggest that we can learn the seventh law, which is to establish courts to enforce the first six, can be found a bit of a reference in the Moshav Leitzim. It says that a person should not sit in a Moshav of a Leitzim, shouldn't sit among scoffers. Now it's interesting that, again, there's a reference from Rashi in the Chumash that sitting refers to sitting in a court of law and being a judge. How do I know this? Because it says that Vayeshev Lot Bishar Sodom. It says that Lot sat at the gates of Sodom. Rashi comments, what was he doing there? He was an active judge. So although it's also that specifically implied from the word sha'ar, from the word gate, because in those days the courts were at the gates of the city. But nevertheless, we also see that the word vayeshev, which is sitting, that he sat, is a reference to being a judge. Now, in Jewish law, actually, the judges must be seated. So, once again, sitting is an allusion to courts of law. Furthermore, in the Perkei Avos, in the Ethics of the Fathers, in the 3rd chapter, the second Mishnah states the following. Rabbi Chanina, actually it's pronounced Chananya. Rabbi Chananya ben Tradon Omer, Rabbi Chananya ben Tradon said, Shnaim sheyoshvim ve'en beineim divrei Torah, harei zeh moshav leitzim. In English, that means, when two people are sitting together and there are no words of Torah between them, this is a session of scorners. Shenemar, as it is stated, v'moshav leitzim lo yashav. And in a session of scorners or scoffers, he did not sit. So in other words, this Mishnah quotes our verse and tells us that if two are sitting and there's no Torah between them, that it's deemed to be a session of scorners, as they say, a collective sitting of settlement of scoffers. So that's brought in Pirkei Avos, and that's also mentioned in the Code of Jewish Law. It's quite a level of piety. Many people recite a verse of Psalms when they eat. It's actually customary to do so before reciting the grace after meals in order to fulfill this specific command and this specific ethical form of ethical conduct. But as it relates to us, the idea is that this verse relates to a group. Moshav Leitzim is many. So we're referring to a seated group. Again, this word seating refers to judging. And not only that, but the Leitzim is talking about the study and the promulgation of Torah, which is implied in the idea that we should establish, that the nation should establish courts and educate people in the seven. Okay. There was one more point I wanted to bring out to you on this first verse, and we touched on it last time, but I just wanted to really emphasize it a bit because it's important, and that is that the words Biatzas Reshaim, that we're talking about a man who's fortunate for not walking in the counsel of the wicked. There have been those who have said in the past, secular Jewish thinkers or others, who have said that Judaism is about acts. It's a religion of activity and conduct. But here we see clearly in Tehillim here in this first verse a reference to counsel. Atzas is the counsel of, is referring to ideas and thought, the thoughts of the wicked. Last time I spoke about the idea that we're talking about values, that the person is entrenched in values that are hostile to Torah, and that has a horrible effect. I want to just approach it from a little bit of a different vantage point and bring out this other idea. And that is that a thought is the gateway to both speech and action. When the Torah and the Tanya discusses this concept, There's an idea of thoughts that come into our mind, and there's the idea of thoughts that we permit to linger there. Thoughts that come into our mind, it's not our fault. In fact, that's supposed to be that way. That's part of the human struggle with, as they try to perfect themselves. So the subconscious or the ego puts on, ideas. It's natural to have ideas that are counter to Torah and counter to Jewish ethics to come up in their mind. But the idea is of conscious thinking, which part of that is making a choice to continue upon a path of thinking about something negative. For example, if a jealous thought comes into a person's mind, are they going to run with that and continue that thought and accept that thought, or will they counter the thought in their own mind as they're digesting it? If they do not counter the thought, it's going to grow, it's going to breed, and from that, it's going to develop speech and action. It's as we say in Hebrew, it's baduk u'manosa. This has been tested out by many, many generations. If you allow a thought to fester, it doesn't just stay there. It becomes then speech and becomes then action. This is a very, very important concept. Many people think, well, I haven't, especially in modern culture, there's this idea that, well, I haven't done anything. I'm free to think any thought I want. I haven't hurt anybody. But the problem is it doesn't stop there. You will hurt somebody because that thought has become something you say, and unfortunately it won't stop there. It's going to become something you do. As our sages famously say, that if a person becomes angry and allows themselves to destroy property, then it's not going to stop there. They will continue to transgress until eventually they come to idolatry. The idea is if they leave themselves to a free rein and they just act upon their passions, there's no end to it. So that starts with the gateway is thought. The beginning is how we think. It's quite a difficult thing, but in reality, it's the easiest way to go about it. If a person attempts to change themselves by just self-control without changing the way they think, it's very tough. I wish you good luck, but it probably won't work. You have to change the way you think. And obviously, that's why Torah study is so important, because you have to change the way you think about the world. But even that is enough. When, like I said, when ideas come to a person's mind, then they have to try to shove them aside if they're wrong. If a person, same way even in terms of a belief in God. If a doubt comes to a person's mind, they have to shove that doubt aside. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be studying more in terms of, understanding God, etc. But nevertheless, that doubt is it is an idolatrous thought, is it not? And it's only going to cause more problems. Once we've reached this place, and all of you have, where we're here and we've come to this realization, then the time for further doubt is over. Obviously, the same thing goes with the rest of the 7 Noahide laws, and I don't really have to elaborate. But no, is it literally forbidden in the 7 Noahide laws to have a forbidden thought? No, it's not. But it's just a question of wise advice that keep the gateway clean, correct? And beyond that, certainly from a perspective of the sages and from a Hasidic perspective, it's clearly an offshoot. In Hasidic thinking, person's soul has 3 garments, whatever that means. It's a kind of a external expression of the soul, but the soul yet at the same time unifies with these 3 things, and those 3 things are thought, speech, and action. Think about that. Your soul is unified with your thoughts, your intentional thoughts. Famously, the Rav Chaim Volozhiner says in his famous work, Nefesh HaChaim, that when a Jew has a thought of adultery in his mind, then what he's doing has a worse effect in the higher worlds than when Titus violated a woman in the Holy of Holies. Wow, that's a powerful thing to say. Quite powerful thing. That's telling us that thought is extremely, extremely powerful thing, isn't it? It's not a joke. It's a scary thought. Let's face it, by the time Titus got there, God's presence had already left there. But in any event, point is that what a good person's a person's temple is their mind, and we're actually going to see that soon in the following verses. A person's temple is their mind and their brain. Keep it as such. Keep it pure. Okay, now we are actually going to go on to verse 2. Verse 2 states in the Hebrew, Kim b'saras Hashem cheptzo v'saraso yogeh yomam v'layla. Rather, his desire is in the Torah of the Lord, and in his Torah he meditates day and night. So, first of all, we see that from the words ki'im, rather, we see that these two things are coupled together. They're united. In other words, the negative, the refraining from evil, is coupled together with doing the positive of binding oneself with the Torah. So this person that we spoke of, who is the full fortunate person, in reality, it isn't enough, although it's primary, to refrain and stay away from evil, but that's not enough. He has to do good, and he has to desire good. What does the verse say? The verse tells us that this person's desire is for Torah. So in other words, we're talking about a person here who has dreams about Torah. Wow, his desire is for Torah. That's what he really wants. Not just Torah, but the Torah of the Lord, the Torah of Hashem. So it's not just he likes it intellectually. He wants to know, what does God think? He wants to know, what is God's knowledge? What does God want to communicate with me? What is God's reality in the world? That's what he wants to know. It's not just he wants to know some subject because he wants to be, very versed in it, and he wants to get a PhD in Talmud. No. He wants to know, get close to God's mind. Torah Hashem. And in his Torah, he meditates day and night. He's meditating on it day and night. Well, clearly, you see here the importance of Torah study. It's unbelievable. He doesn't even mention here, King David doesn't mention any other act. He doesn't say that you refrain from evil and all day you give charity. I mean, it would be a beautiful thing. I can ask, why doesn't he say anything about charity? He does speak about charity in other chapters, but he doesn't do it here. Here he says that person refrains from evil and his entire attention is turned towards Torah. And it's implied from the end of the verse, he meditates on it. We're talking about Torah study, not just Torah action alone. But we'll get into that more in a moment. So let's get back to some of the questions on this verse that we touched on last time. And I want to really get into the malbim on this verse that I did not discuss last time. That's why I'm going back. So it says here, K'im b'toras Hashem cheptzo, that his desire is for the Torah of God. And in his Torah, he meditates day and night. So again, Rashi is bothered by this distinction. Why first we talk about the Torah of God, and then we talk about it's the person's Torah. So Rashi is bothered by this, and therefore he brings a teaching of the sages to explain it. And he says the Torah Hashem, it's God's Torah before you toil. Torah so yageh. But when you're meditating day and night, in other words, you're toiling in it, then it becomes yours. That is Rashi's interpretation. And we spoke about that at length last time, so I'm not going to get into that more to discuss the practical ramifications of it now. But now we're going to turn to the Malbim's interpretation of the verse. He has a different approach. He's trying to answer the same question. What is the distinction between Torah Hashem, the Torah of God, and his Torah? It seems to be different. Why is the verse referring to it in this different way? Why? So the Malbim, actually, he defines here two types of Torah. We're actually talking about two different kinds of Torah. Yeah, correct. And he says that with Torah Hashem, it's cheptzo. It's his desire is with the Torah of God. But with his Torah, he meditates day and night. Why are these two things together? He also explains that. He teaches us the significance of every single word and why they're together. He says the Torah of Hashem refers to God's knowledge. So in reality, it's way beyond us. It's talking about the hypothetical of Torah, and we're talking about Kabbalistic knowledge. We're talking about non-practical Torah. Okay? It's generally talking about the Kabbalah and the understanding of God and the heavenly realms, which a person really can't comprehend. There's also another way to understand what the Malbim says, in that it's talking about the halachic hypotheticals and its underpinnings. The reason I say this because in the yeshiva, and especially in the Lithuanian yeshivot, there's a lot of emphasis on the conceptualization of the halacha and its underpinnings and the very abstract ideas that lie behind the halacha. Those things really also you cannot really comprehend. I believe this is what the Malbim is saying. To really know or understand the underpinnings of the law, you'll never fully grasp that. You can try to grab a little here, a little there, understand the reasons behind it, and understand some of its structure. But he says, when it comes to that, it's cheftzo. That's your desire. You should always want to get there. It's kind of like reaching to this. It's reaching up to the heavens, but never reaching the sky. You're never really going to get there, but you have to continue reaching and trying. You have to get as far as you can, but it's always remain in a state of cheftzo, something you're desiring to get to. It always will seem beyond. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to reach and study it, but nevertheless, to fully 100% grasp it, says the Malbim, you won't be able to. I can explain it this way. I'm not saying that you're not going to be able to understand the Kabbalah. I'm not saying you can't understand Chassidut. What I'm saying is that the extent that we understand it is in physical metaphors that don't really talk about its actual reality. Because we're in the physical world, we cannot understand the heavenly realms and what's going on in the soul. We can only talk about it in metaphors that relate to bodily and material things. So in a scientific sort of sense, you can't really you're not really knowing a lot about these things. You know a very basic, as we can compare it to the physical, and what's little has been revealed, or a lot has been revealed to the prophets, and what's been revealed to Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, etc., etc. But in reality, you're just touching the edge of it. You're not really just look like looking up at the sky. You don't understand the texture of the stars from looking from down here. You get a little bit, you see something, you see this couple of specks up there, but you're not getting the full picture. So similarly, of course, that's incredible grandeur to gaze at the sky and the stars. So I'm not saying a person shouldn't study it, but nevertheless, it remains something that you're touching on, but it's way beyond. That is the Malbim says about that half of the verse. However, B'soraso, he says, this is practical halacha. Practical halacha, this we can comprehend. It's talking about the physical world, how we have to act, how we have to behave. That we can completely master from top to bottom. That's it's our mastery, and we can do this. This belongs fully to us. And that's what it means. And this a person meditates day and night. Now, it's interesting that Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev used to say that why does a person, a person says that they make a blessing every day, that to occupy yourself with Torah, but the average person doesn't really do so. So he says that, well, yes, they do. He says because when a person goes around in their life and they think, how do I behave in this situation? What do I do in this situation? And they making a decision to follow the Torah law, that is Torah study to a certain extent. They're thinking about Torah as they're acting throughout the day. That is a form of Yehege Yomam V'Layla. So similarly here, it fits right into the Malbim's explanation, although he does not say this. I mean, this is an addition, this is a footnote of mine, that B'tzaraso, when it comes to the practical halacha, that a person can do day and night, because in every situation, whether they're at work, whether with their family, whether even when they come out of the bathroom, whatever they're doing, there's always halacha applies. So that is day and night. Practical halacha applies. Okay. One more footnote, the word yehege. The Radak explains, and other commentaries, this is the word meditate. The word meditate in the Hebrew means both thought, and also there are references to it meaning speech. So it can mean both, which is interesting because often in Torah study, when people meditate, they say it aloud while they're reviewing it and while they're thinking about it. So there seems to be a connection between both thinking and meditating at the same time. Okay, now we've concluded the second verse. So it looks like we're just going to touch a little bit on the third verse yet again, but we actually are finished verses 1 and 2 of chapter 1 now. Okay, verse 3. V'haya k'etz shasul al palgei mayim, asher piyo yiten b'ito, v'aleo lo libo, v'chol asher yaseh yatzliach. In the English, he shall be like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season and whose leaf does not wither, and all that he does shall prosper. So, well, first of all, clearly we have a metaphor saying that a righteous person who's doing all these things, who is refraining from evil and studying Torah day and night, quite a person, that they're like a tree planted on streams of water, whose fruit they give in its proper time, and its leaves do not wither, and all that they do is successful. So interestingly, if you look at Rashi, you'll see that he doesn't comment much on this. He really doesn't say much. There are Rashi's first two comments are Old French, just explaining some of the words. I don't know Old French, and I really didn't take much time to try to figure out what it means. If you're interested, I guess you could research it. But what I can tell you is until the words Valeo lo yibo and its leaves do not wither, Rashi has no substantive comment, which I find interesting. He doesn't comment at all. He evidently thinks that he sees it as something that is just logical for you to understand the metaphor. His only problem is with the word, the leaves do not wither. That's his only problem. With that, Rashi has a comment. So the question is, why is that? How does he understand the beginning of the verse? Clearly, he assumes, and I'd like to mention that the Lubavitcher Rebbe states that Rashi was written in a way that it should be accessible to a 5-year-old. Okay, maybe he meant someone in the 5th grade at least, because I don't know what 5-year-old can be pretty difficult. But in any event, he's talking about it's a very simple interpretation. It should be on a very, very simple level. Rashi is trying to express things to the simple level, very straight logic, nothing deep. So I think what that means is that clearly the metaphor of a tree that bears fruit, I think that's a metaphor everyone understands, and Rashi doesn't bother to comment. In other words, that a person who behaves in the manner previously mentioned, they will bear fruit. It's actually a common expression in parlance. Something that's fruitful. What is something that's fruitful? Something that is gainful. Something that brings enjoyment to the person or to another. Someone that makes them some way prosper. Something like that. Something positive. I think if you think of the metaphor, simple terms, it's something that brings enjoyment and is an asset to others, right? Because the fruit of the tree does what? It's an asset to the tree. It falls on the ground and the seeds go on the ground. But really the fruit part is primarily an asset to who? Others, human beings, animals who partake of the fruit. So what we're saying here is a profound thing, and Rashi doesn't say it, but we can figure it out on our own. That such a person is an asset to everyone around him. Such a person brings a blessing to his entire surroundings. And he doesn't even do anything. He doesn't do anything except he's himself. What does a tree do? How does a tree bring enjoyment to others? It's just a healthy tree. Tree doesn't do outreach. It just sits there and grows beautiful fruit. It's a profound idea. If your roots are solid, if you're healthy and you're bearing beautiful fruit, everybody around you is going to enjoy that. It's a basic tenet of Judaism that a righteous person brings blessing to everyone around them without doing anything, just being righteous. I mean, clearly we see this from the story of Abraham and Sodom and Gomorrah, where Abraham asked God, are there 10 righteous people? He doesn't ask them, did they do outreach? Do they have big synagogues there? How many followers do they have? No, he just says, are there righteous people? If there would be righteous people, the whole city would be saved. Unbelievable. So, if you're looking to do some social justice and make the world a better place, be a better person. Bottom line. Be better. Be better. Be a fruit tree. Be so rich in faith. Be so rich in good conduct. Be so rich in good emotion that you bear fruit all around you. That is the most important thing you can do. Rashi goes so far to say, Rashi's bothered only by one thing. Rashi's bothered by the phrase that its leaves don't wither. I think what Rashi wants to know is, leaves aren't to benefit to anyone else. Why is this part of the metaphor? What do leaves have to do with it? That's what Rashi wants to know. Rashi answers, he says that even the common speech of Torah scholars, even from that we can learn Torah from. In other words, the fruit is compared to their actual Torah. The leaves, what do you get from a leaf? Right? You think. It doesn't seem to really bring direct enjoyment. But yet it does. It brings, even from there, if we work on it, we can get something out of it. And the Malbim, we're going to go into the Malbim next time, but the Malbim says that from leaves, they can be grinded into medicine. So the same idea. If you think into the words of Torah scholars and you pay close attention, so in other words, you put a little toil into it, you can learn great things from those as well. I think we'll conclude here for tonight's lecture, and we'll continue next time on this verse and discuss the Malbim further. And now I'll take questions.
Any questions?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hey and Haish. Does that connect with the idea of Abraham with the hay there?
It's possible. Very possible. The hay, it is one of the letters in the ineffable name, in the 4-letter, in the Tetragrammaton, and it often has references like that. I haven't found a source for that in this particular case, but on the other hand, if you look at the word ish, you see an interesting thing that within that full formulation, we have 2 of the base letters of the 4-letter name, which is Hey and Yud.
That's Haish specifically. So with the context with Haish referring to Moshe Rabbeinu and the things that you touched on earlier in depth, would that indicate that Haish is particularly talking about a righteous person when we see these 4 letters?
Again, I can't guarantee that. I don't remember it ever being mentioned, Haish, in reference to a wicked person. I'll give you another example. Mi ha'ish hachafetz chayim is also a verse in Tehillim. I'm sorry, I cannot tell you the exact chapter now. But who is the man who seeks life? The reference to the man is a man, in other words, a person, a righteous person. So again, we find at least a righteous person in potential, because saying, who is the man who seeks? He's seeking ha'ish. Then he watches his tongue, etc. Watches his tongue, the famous Chafetz Chaim, if you haven't heard of him till now, but that same verse, Mi ha'ish, who is the man, Chafetz Chaim. So we find again that with the prefix hey, which is the subject, hey, the man, seems to refer to righteous people.
When we see Haish in the Torah, or in the Tanakh period, we should take great care to see exactly what it is pointing at.
That's exactly right.
That would be the best way to notate that, right?
Yes. If you happen to come up with an incident where Haish would reference a wicked person, please let me know, and we'll try to delve into it.
But clearly, just the word ish without the hey can clearly indicate either righteous or unrighteous personnel.
Correct. The word ish means someone of stature.
Right.
And isha would be similar in a feminine way. Yes.
Sandy and then Leslie.
Other translations I have read, it says the man who walks not in the counsel, nor stands, nor sits, like in the present tense. This translation has it who walked, who stood and sat, and like in the past tense. Is there significance in which would it be, the present or the past?
I think past is more accurate grammatically to the Hebrew. As far as what message we can learn from that, I think certainly because doing wrong is always past tense. Right now you can always do something good. Bad is in the past.
Yeah, it also indicates an attitude of tshuva.
Exactly. Don't forget, at every moment, a person can repent. And therefore, you cannot say now you're walking in anything. Certainly the future, one cannot say he will walk. There is no such thing. The future can always be good. You probably have heard that there's a famous law in the Jewish law of marriage, that if someone says that I'm marrying you on the condition that I'm a righteous saint, so the law is that they're deemed married. That's right. And he could be an ignoramus, can be the most simple or even a wicked person, because it says it could be at that moment he repented. Possible. That's a profound idea.
It is, Leslie?
Can you tell us a little bit about Malbin? You said Malbin?
Malbin.
Malbim. M-A-L-B-I-M.
We have this book, the books here.
Is that a book, a person?
That's a person. That's a person.
That was a person who lived in the 19th century. He was a great rabbi who served in various cities, mostly in Eastern Europe, who lived during the Enlightenment era, and he was a counter-Enlightenment hero.
And if
You check Wikipedia if you have any questions about that.
Yeah, if you want, we have the essential Malbins here with the
He was a great commentator on the entire Hebrew Bible, and he was also a great Hebrew linguist. So yeah, his Pirush, his commentary in the Hebrew is quite beautiful. It's a bit more complex, I would say, than he certainly uses no Aramaic, which is more common maybe in Rashi. He uses strictly Hebrew, from what I've seen.
Anybody else?
Going back to the present and past tense, I just noticed in verse 2, it's all in the present tense. That
Right.
I meditate now,
Right.
desire for the Torah is now.
Right.
Switch there.
Also, I have an observation from the passage of whose foliage never fades.
Yes.
I really began to think that what is the necessity of foliage for a fruit tree, and the foliage is what collects the chlorophyll and makes the chlorophyll and the energy for the tree. So it seems that this man will never lack the ability to continually produce fruit and to be successful because he always gets divine energy at all times. It's something to consider.
Well, the Malbim is going to discuss a similar point, but he's going to draw it from the fact that this tree is along streams of water. Because a tree that's along streams of water has constant sustenance and is not subject to the changes and cycles of nature, a dry season, etc. There's always water. So we'll get into that next time.
May it be we all are that way, right? Ms.
Into
Benny-
that.
Ms.
If
Benny
someone
has a question.
studies Torah every day, there are long streams of water.
Right.
I was just going to say that reminds me of the Sabbath Psalm 92. Talks about a date palm that's
Right.
its branches.
The righteous are referred to as trees, and the wicked are referred to as grass. And we're going to get into why that is next time. Okay? Okay. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye. Bye now.